Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of Limited Deck Building. I'm Justin from Playing Board Games, and today joining me is chat. You guys can't hear them, but they're going to be probably shouting out stuff, shouting out memes like, why isn't this a Lola deck? Or Lola can run Cherished Keepsake. But we're back for another episode of Limited Collection Deck Building, and this one I'm going to be building a deck for Fighter Will Yorick and clue-getting Safina Rousseau as she loads in on the ether. This is for Limited Collection Deck Building. I'm building two decks for two players. Yorick is going to focus more on the fighting. Safina is going to focus more on the clue-getting, and it's going to be built with revised core, the Dunwich Investigator expansion cards, and now, because it was just released, the Carcosa Investigator expansion cards. Of course, there are a lot more than just this that are currently out there in the game. However, this is for people focusing on who are just starting out and might be buying the sets as they come out, and you might be thinking, what can I do with less cards? Of course, deck building becomes a lot easier when you don't have to deal with the limitations that are included within a limited collection. So let's dive in. And as I did last time, I'm going to make some recommendations for upgrades as well. So Will Yorick, after you defeat an enemy, place an asset from your discard pile, paying its cost, limit once per round. It's a very strong ability, and it's very, very spicy. We have Safina Rousseau. She has, when you would draw your opening hand, draw 13 cards. Instead, choose up to 5 events to place beneath this card and keep 8 cards in your opening hand, discard the rest. As an action, you can choose an event beneath this card and draw it. Does not provoke attacks of opportunity. Notably, she has 3 copies of the Painted World, where you play as the exact copy of a non-exceptional event that is beneath Safina Rousseau, and remove it from the game. Remove the Painted World from the game instead of discarding it. So already, right off the bat, we know that Safina is going to want to play a lot of events. She's going to want to be very event-focused, and Will Yorick is going to be very asset-focused. Safina Rousseau is a little bit more daunting to me. But I think what we're going to do is what we usually do is we're going to kind of like build these decks kind of simultaneously, but focusing on one more than the other. So Safina has 33 cards that she's going to need for her deck. And as our clue getter, we're going to want to try to take advantage of what we can and try to get as many clues out of our events. So she runs Rogue 0 to 5 and Mystics 0 to 2. So we're going to look right off the bat. Drawn to the Flame is a good event that gets clues. It sounds scary. Admittedly, yes, it is scary. However, you have really good defensive stats with Safina. You have 4 brain and 4 foot, which means that like most of the cards out of the deck are less scary to you. And enemies can be good for Will Yorick because it means that he can play cards from his discard pile. So on that note, we're also going to grab 2 Warder protections. Like we're gonna want to be very event heavy in this deck because you really want to hit 5 events beneath Safina. It came out last Saturday. Right now, stream. I'm talking in YouTube time, so it hasn't come out by the time of this recording. But when this video is out last week, Britt and I released an expanded guide for Safina Rousseau, where we talk a lot about the strategy for what events you want to put under her and what events you want to keep in your hand. So you should check that out if you are interested in getting better at Safina Rousseau. Okay, those are the... You might be thinking, is that it for the events? It is it for the events. So let's look at the for the clue-getting events. So we're going to look at the events over here on the rogue side. And already you can kind of just see that there's not really any that like get clues. There's not really any of these that kind of get clues. So Mr. Wonderboy, this is a limited thing. So we're just building with Core, Dunwich, and Carcosa. So we do not have access to Burning the Midnight Oil or Versatile for the limited deck building here. But, however, there still are some good... I have something stuck in my throat. There are still some good events that we can take advantage of with these things that we have here. Looking at the neutrals as well. I mean, we're going to be playing Emergency Cash. That's just an easy thing that we can include here. But we're going to want... This card looks like not great. 2 copies of I'm Out of Here. But in our friend Path to Carcosa, this is actually a particularly relevant card that we're just going to take a moment and just, without spoilers, put some respect on. It also, worst case scenario, commits for 2 foot, which is relevant for her. The emergency cash, I didn't show what it was, but you should know what it is by now. It just says gain 3 money. Like, money is sick, and you're going to need them because you're going to want to be playing a lot of events. On that note, we're going to step away from the events temporarily. With a limited collection, we're not going to go like to the full surplus of events that you sometimes see with a full collection Safina. But we are going to try to take advantage of our brain stat with this card, David Renfield. So, David Renfield, well, has at least 1 Doom on him. You get +1 brain. You can exhaust him. You place 1 Doom on him, gain 1 resource for each Doom on him. He does sound very scary, and you ultimately do want a way to, like, deal with David, which we are going to kind of, like, put some things in, but, like, with a collection like this, it might not be as possible. Let me just look at the 1 to 5 events. No, I don't even have it in here, huh? That's crazy. Okay. But David Renfield is very good. It boosts our brain, which is going to be relevant, and it also gives us money, which is important because we're going to be playing a lot of events. We are going to look at a few more assets that we have here. We're going to grab 2 Holy Rosaries to make our brain stat better because that's how we're going to be doing a lot of things. We're going to put in... we're going to put in 1 Shriveling, just as a one-of, because this can, like, if things get overwhelming, you can deal with an enemy. I don't think it, like... This is kind of like, it's of my opinion that in 2 players, the best, like you can build a focused deck, but the best way to win is to kind of flex a little bit to both sides. And Shriveling can help you do that, while also being a way for you to potentially kill David if he's starting to get out of hand. We are going to run 2 copies of this Rite of Seeking, though. So, investigate using brain instead of book. This is how we're going to be getting clues. Okay. Going back to some of the events here. We're going to run a 1 of Astral Travel. So, move to any revealed location, reveal a random token from the Chaos Bag. If you reveal a bad token, you must discard an item or an ally asset you control if you cannot take 1 damage. This can be a way for you to deal with David Renfield while also just being able to teleport around the board. We're going to have a bit of... I don't know what the term is. Redundancy, that's the term. We're going to have a bit of redundancy, and we are going to also put in 2 copies of this elusive. So disengage from each enemy, engage with you, and move to a revealed location with no enemies. This also kind of does the job of the I'm Out of Here, but it doesn't hurt to have more, right? It doesn't hurt to have more of what you're trying to be doing. Okay. So we're at 18 cards. We're making good time. We're doing pretty good here. Are there any other like assets that we want to run in this? I know Bryn has tried Dario in Safina, and he doesn't like it, so we're going to stick with David Renfield instead. David Renfield, for the terms of like gaining resources, David Renfield is just better, even though you do want to kill him. We could reasonably do Lone Wolf. I don't think it's a necessity, though, because I do think that this Safina wants to be close to the Will Yorick. I don't think they actually want to split up too much. But you could. Like, this is kind of like, it might actually even end up depending on what other cards we might need. So we're going to put a little pin in that one. Pickpocketing is fine. It's fine. You could run this. I don't think it's like, once again, we're going to see as we get to things. Going into skills, we are going to grab a Watch This. We ain't leaving home without a copy of Watch This in our pockets. Oh boy. Luckily, the 2 of the 3 symbols that are on this card are brain and foot, which are things that we're going to want to be doing. Okay, and we are going to also play Quick Thinking. Quick Thinking is just a staple. It's just a really good card. If it's successful by 2 or more after it resolves, you may immediately take an action as if it were your turn. Just a really good card. For Watch This as well, it also acts as our economy. If you don't know what it does, you basically gamble resources into a test, and then you try to get those resources back. It's a good time. All right, any mystic skills that we think are probably worth our time? Probably not on like our initial look. One thing to be aware of is that you only have 5 physical damage, so you really don't want to be like... So like, well, Fearless, if it healed damage, it would probably be a little bit spicier. But you just want to like maybe be aware of that as things are going through this. Because you're playing an early campaign, we are going to run some copies of Delve Too Deep. These are going to be sided out pretty quickly, but we do want these to be a thing. One thing to be aware of, I'm like 99.9% sure, it doesn't work with the Painted World, so don't put your Delve Too Deeps underneath them, unless like you have no other choice. And because then it's like you have to spend a different action to get it out. So just something to be aware of. You probably don't want to put those under Safina. Hypnotic Gaze, I think that's pretty expensive for a dodge. I don't think it's that worth it. Moonlight Ritual, we're not really like going big on the Doom, so we're not going to worry about it too much. Quantum Flux, I mean, realistically, if there actually is an investigator that can use Quantum Flux, it's probably Safina Rousseau. If it was in the deck, it wouldn't be a problem. But I don't think like I'm gonna. I might, but I don't think right now. But I think if there is a deck for this works, especially with the way your weakness works, Star of Hyades, it can be a problem. So you could. I think there's a case for it. Storm of Spirits, I think, is a nice card. But I think Will York's going to make up enough, and I think the Shriveling is going to be good. We don't need more damage. Uncage the Soul probably can have a place in here. We'll see as we get things, but I think Uncage the Soul can have a home in here. Going through the rogue events one more time. Backstab could be worth it. Cheap Shot could be worth it. Cheap Shot actually could be worth it. Contraband, nah, we're not shooting guns. Daring Maneuver, if you're going to be like really want to focus on lockpicks, it could be a thing, or like Opportunist, but I think we're not going to worry about it in this deck. Narrow Escape. I think Narrow Escape ain't bad, to be honest. I don't know how necessary it is as we see things, as we get into some of the other stuff here. Sleight of Hand, we're not playing items that can take advantage of it. Sneak Attack. Sneak Attack, if we can't find other things, it can be a good like level 0 card, right, for our deck. So much so that I think I'm going to put them in. And this is honestly actually probably looking pretty good for events. So our remaining 5 cards could likely be assets. What I'm going to do is I'm going to grab over here from the Mystic side. We are going to grab 2 Ritual Candles, which are just like cards that ain't bad, right? They're just like, it's just like a good, fine 1-cost card to put into play. And I think then we're also going to look at some... Okay, I know I'm going to do what Bryn would do here. We're going to grab, I think realistically, like you can make the case for Guts versus Unexpected Courage. But I think we're going to just focus on the Guts for this deck. I think that's going to just probably be better. And then the last thing I'm going to put in, instead of... This could easily be a 1 of Quantum Flux. And it was going to be until I remembered that we're playing Path to Carcosa, and a 1 of Fine Clothes is probably a very nice, strong tech card to kind of just keep things going. Keep things going for a little bit. It's a good tech card for the first few scenarios. So we're just going to quickly save this, and we're going to just hop on over to our Will Yorick deck. And this Will Yorick deck, honestly, should be pretty... I'm not going to say like it's going to build itself, but this is... Will Yorick is a very strong investigator, and he's also pretty simple to kind of like put the pieces together and know and take advantage of it. So... what we're going to do is we're going to start with the assets. And we're going to grab 2 Cherished Keepsakes. So Cherished Keepsake soaks for 2. But the best thing about Cherished Keepsake is that it costs 0. And which means that like Will Yorick can always play it from his discard pile if when he kills an enemy. And it basically means that you can like almost never die. You can almost never die. Wow. On that note, we're also going to play 2 of the Leather Coat. So the leather coat over here, it's basically like the same as the cherished keepsake, except for meat damage. One thing we are going to do as well is we are going to tech into the neutral side, and we are going to run 2 copies of fine clothes as well. This is going to upgrade. You're going to upgrade out of your fine clothes, but it's still like very cheap soak in Will Yorick, and redundancy is ultimately a good thing. They commit. It's totally fine for you to just keep swapping stuff out. And yeah, fine, as Mr. Wonderboy says, fine clothes is also very easy to recur. It's very good. Speaking of very easy to recur, we are going to run 2 copies of Knife. Now, I will admit that Knife is not like a gangbusters card, like not even close. However, there are some investigators that can take advantage of Knife. And Will Yorick is one of those. So let's paint a picture. You're fighting an enemy with 3 health. You deal 2 damage to it on your first attack. On that first attack, you commit Knife to the attack. It's in your graveyard. You then kill the enemy and then play the Knife from your graveyard, which really actually, like, it's what makes Knife not... What makes Knife, like, really kind of clunky is that it's 2 actions. However, if you look at Knife as just a kill spell that you can set up, it becomes a lot better. Now, with Will Yorick, you don't need to spend time, or you don't need to spend an action setting it up, so Knife is actually relevant in Will Yorick. And I think Knife is actually actively good in Will Yorick. Does it get outpowered by other cards? Yes. However, Bryn from the channel, who plays a lot of Will Yorick decks, he runs Knife and Will Yorick till the absolute end. Like, it's actually, like, actively good in him. Kukri, not so much. Kukri, not so much. All right. We're going to take a quick stop on the Guardian side, because we are going to run 2 copies of Prepared for the Worst, because you want to find your weapons. This doesn't, like, this, if you have a bigger collection and you can run more weapons, you can make up for it, Prepare for the Worst, because Will Yorick doesn't really need to, like, find, like, he's not like, I need this weapon, otherwise I'm going to do nothing. Will Yorick can play a lot of small weapons and then take advantage of them. However, when you have this card in your collection and you have a smaller collection, you might as well just use it and take advantage of it in this Will Yorick deck. We're also going to run 2 copies of Evidence. This is to fit with what I was saying earlier, how you want to flex a little bit, and this is a very good flex card in Guardian to grab clues. Okay, any Guardian assets? I mean, we're going to have a weapon here. We're playing No Taboo, so you're going to run 2 copies of Machete. You're going to run 2 copies of Machete. I'm just telling you that right now. When you're playing No Taboo, this card is really nice for that kind of thing. So we're going to be doing that. Okay, let's go back to assets over here. Our ally of choice in this deck is going to be Pete Sylvester, because he never dies. And Will Yorick, he can get on the never die train pretty quickly. So we're going to want Pete Sylvester to be our captain on the never die train, because it'll allow us to never die. While also boosting up, not so much on this one, but for the upgraded one, it's going to be really good. We're looking at, I think we're going to run... So you could run the 45 automatic here. I personally think it's a bit action intensive. So, I'm sorry, not action intensive, resource intensive. I still have a Knife on the brain. I think it's a little bit costly, and I do like to keep the cost, like the curve, as low as possible in Will Yorick. So I think what we're going to do instead is I'm going to run, we're going to start with a 1 of Baseball Bat. The downside of Baseball Bat is not nearly as bad in Will Yorick because you can recur it. And speaking of recursion, we're going to grab, sorry, I'm in this one. We're going to be grabbing this beautiful thing that just entered your collection, assuming you're buying the Dunwich and then Carcosa. We have Resourceful. This card's very good. It's very good. On that note, we're going to also grab 2 Luckies. Like, once again, we do want to focus a lot on the assets that we're going to be dealing as we're going to be going with here. But we are going to grab, like, the good events. And we're also going to probably look at grabbing some skills, which we can quickly just do. We're going to grab 2 overpowers. More fist is good. You want to pass your fist tests. And we're going to grab 2 vicious blows, because vicious blows are good. You're going to want to deal more damage when you pass your fist tests. It's just easy math. Like, the math practically writes itself. We only need to add 5 more cards to this deck, huh? So we probably want to look at assets. Guard Dog. Easy. Easy. You also, sorry, instead of Guard Dog, it also could be... You know what, actually, we're going to get away from Pete Sylvester. I think we're going to get away from Pete Sylvester. We're going to do the Bryn thing. We're going to follow the Bryn course of action. We're going to do Beat Cops and Guard Dogs. They are expensive, so we do want to add 2 emergency caches into this deck. Not that one. 2 emergency caches. So Beat Cop gives you +1 fist, and then you can discard it to deal 1 damage to enemy or location. And then Guard Dog has the, when an enemy attack deals damage to Guard Dog, deal 1 damage. So I know I'm going to say, like, Pete Sylvester was good at keeping you alive. I do think that, sorry, I had, like, recent 3-player stuff on the brain with this Will Yorick. But Pete Sylvester is good. Like, Pete Sylvester, don't get me wrong, he's good in Will Yorick. Like, he's great everywhere. However, Beat Cop and Guard Dog are really good because they... help you on the fighter side, which is what this deck is focusing on. We need 1 more card. And realistically, we want it to be an asset that can potentially be good. If we can't find one, let's look at events that make money. Oh, Bryn would probably say On the Hunt. That's what Bryn would probably say here, right? A 1 On the Hunt is probably worth our time. Bryn would probably definitely have more assets than this, but, like, I mean, like, you have the plan of the things you want to keep recurring, right? Cherished Keepsake, Leather Coat, Fine Clothes, Beat Cop, Guard Dog, Machete, Knife, right? Like these are the things you're not going to want to recur your machete. And the baseball bat's just there as, like, a placeholder to what you upgrade into, because I do think that, like, realistically you get the machete out and you just, like, don't stop. Your knife is there to make those situations when you are engaged with multiple enemies, but your your Guard Dog can also help with that. You realistically could, like, once again, you could run the 45 automatic. I think the 45 automatic is still, like, a very good weapon. For me personally, if you haven't figured it out by now, I'm not big on ammo weapons in the game. I like my physical weapons, my melee weapons. So, like, I err more towards this. But I do think that for, like, the first scenario, this card, this, like, deck, these weapons will get by. Machete's a very strong weapon, right? Like, there are times where it's going to be weaker, but then hopefully you have other plans for that, like a knife, right? Like, that's why it's there. On the Hunt allows you to grab an enemy, which you can use to kill to play something from your discard pile. Shall we get some notable upgrades for these decks? I know I saved them, but that's just because sometimes it gets freaky. I do think that Lantern is also, this is what Mr. Wonderboy said, I think Lantern is also, like, a fine option for a flex. Like, I think that there's nothing wrong with including Lantern here as well. It lets you get clues in downtime on low shroud locations, and it also allows you to just kill enemies that have 1 health left, which can be good when you're pairing it with your machete. This could be run instead of the baseball bat, but the baseball bat is also good because you can find it off you're prepared for the worst, but I think it really comes down to personal preference. Like, when you're doing weapon choice, you could run lanterns, you could add, like, you can even add lanterns, you can even run the 45 automatics. Like, it really comes down to personal preference when it comes to how you want to handle your weapons in this deck. But let's look at some notable cards for Safina. We're going to start with the Mystic cards. So we're going to be adding Rite of Seeking, the upgraded one. We're going to want to put that in our deck eventually as the clue getter. It makes it easier for us to get clues because it gives us more book. So, like, that's just, like, something that's you're going to want to do. Otherwise, there's not too much on the asset side that we're interested in the cards we can play. However, we are going to want to grab the upgraded water protections are also like on our list of good cards. This allows us to also protect Will Yorick, which can be relevant. There's nothing wrong with Time Warp, but I'm not going to put it on our list. You know what? I'll put it on our list. I'll put Time Warp on the list. I think it is relevant enough for a small collection. We played Time Warp a lot back in the day, and it was because we didn't have many other choices, but like, so it's like a little bit outclassed now, not too exciting, but the effect is still good. Blinding Light, Bind Monster, we don't really need. Mind Wipe's not really interesting. Skills, we don't need the Fearless. Going into the neutral cards. I mean, there's always a case for Key of Use. There's always a case for Key of Use, especially the untabooed one. You know what? I'm going to flag them because, like, you can't not give the Relic Hunter on here. Bulletproof Vest if you need it. Like, if you need Bulletproof Vest, it's going to be, like, if you're worried about your health. You also could flag the upgraded Emergency Cache. It also, drawing a card ain't a bad deal. So now let's go to the Rogue events. Hot Streak gets you a lot of money. It's a bit expensive, but it gets you a lot of money. Upgraded Sneak Attack I think is also relevant because you can just like kill an enemy that's not engaged with you, which is hopefully engaged with Will Yorick, or put damage on an enemy, or in the situation where Will Yorick has 2 enemies and his machete's not online, this allows you to stop that. Ace in the Hole just lets you take more actions. It's also an event. You can't play it with, you can't play it with the Painted World when it's underneath her, but that's still okay. It's still a relevant card. Sure Gamble as well. Like, a lot of this stuff is kind of like what your preference is. This is basically like a Green's Lucky, right? You're cheating the game a bit. Going into the skills, I don't think Opportunist is worth it in this deck. Going to the level 1 to 5. You can make a case for lockpicks for low shroud locations. Safina is not as good as a lot of the other rogue investigators at using lockpicks, but you can still make a case that lockpicks is worth the time, especially as a Clover. You're still investigating at 6, but they are going to be more likely to break. Just something to be aware of. I think Suggestion, if it has a place, it's going to be in Safina. So we're going to put that in here. It's lockpicks, but for rogues almost. Like, especially the level 1 version, but we don't have that in our collection. I think you can make a case for Suggestion, but I don't think it's necessary. I mean, you also could... Let me just... There's also a bunch of fun... I mean... Streetwise also probably is worth the time if you want to consider it. And obviously also Gold Pocket Watch. A lot of these things are kind of like, there's a lot of options here. And like, that's the thing about rogues. There's a lot of different directions you can take it, and it really comes down to the preference that you want. If I was going to upgrade this deck, Rite of Seeking would be a priority. Ward of Protection I'd also want to get. Lockpicks I probably would end up running. And I probably would be tempted by Key of Use. The card's just really good. The card's just, like, really good. Like, it's really good. It's really good. Yeah. And then we go to the Will Yorick upgrades. We're going to start... Actually, what we're going to do is we're going to start with the Charisma. Charisma over here in the side deck allows us to play both B-Cop and Guard Dog, which is relevant. On the Survivor side, you could replace the Guard Dogs realistically with upgraded Pete Sylvester. He is very good, as I said. Makes your brain better, makes it so you don't you don't die as much. So you could replace the B-Cops, the Guard Dogs with that. I'd keep the B-Cops so much so that I actually would upgrade the B-Cops. So now the big difference is that they exhaust to deal damage. So the original B-Cop soaks for 2 and 2. The other one now soaks for 3 and 2, and you can exhaust him to deal damage, which means you have 3 pings that you can do, and then when he's dead, you can just play him again. And that's good. Upgraded Vicious Blows can also be flagged over here. I think they're also just, like, good for the for just more damage. 45 automatic again, if you're going the weapon route. I'm not with this deck, but if you wanted to go the weapon route, totally a valid option here for Will Yorick. Also, there's a case for Brother Xavier. I think he's a bit expensive, but the card is really good for like a Will Yorick deck when you can recur him. Less so much, I think, with a smaller collection because like he does cost 5 resources, but still. You can also make a case for Police Badge, but I think the Cherished Keepsake is just a better plan. This can be really good with Will Yorick, but I think the Cherished Keepsake is just like a little bit simpler. Over here on the asset side, looks like we don't have a lot of assets to upgrade into, which kind of sounds a little bit like not great. However, trust me, like the Cherished Keepsake is like good enough as it is. It's really good. You reasonably could run Scrapper. I'm not going to put it on the list, but you reasonably could. Eucatastrophe is worth the time in Will Yorick because his Elder Sign effect is very, very good. So basically, when you reveal a Chaos token that will reduce your skill value to 0, including the auto fail, you get to treat it as an Elder Sign instead. And Yorick's Elder Sign, as you can see up here, is if this test is successful, return 1 card from your discard pile to your hand. That's a really good ability here for Will Yorick. You can grab the upgraded Luckies, I think are also fine. I think there's a case to be made for these flares, but one thing you want to just remember is apart from things like fine clothes, you really don't want to lose too many of your assets in this deck. So like we're getting a lot of good skills. And like you could do Police Badge. You know what? I'll flag it. I'll flag Police Badge and Relic Hunter. I'll flag them. Because I think it is notable enough that it can do work. But as I was saying, even though we're adding events into this, you're not going to want to look at those events replacing your assets because you're going to want to be playing your assets, right? You're going to want to be doing those things. Will to Survive is just good. I don't know if Will Yorick needs it. Man, that art threw me for a loop. Yeah, I think this is like... You could do a test. I'll say the Bryn joke. You could do a test of Will because Will Yorick has to play it because his name's in the title. You could do that. I think, though, this is, a pretty fine upgrade path here. Cool. All right. Well, those were 2 limited decks, focusing on the Dunwich and the Carcosa and, of course, the revised core expansions. I hope this video may have helped you if you are building with a limited deck. Always happy to potentially help people out with that. If there's investigators from this cycle that you want to see for the next one, let me know. Also, if you want to see me attempt to try to build a deck for 3 players with a limited collection, we can give it a shot. So if you want to let me know. I could even try it with 4. I've never done 4. I've never played with like 4 players apart from like twice in my life. Well, 3 times in my life. But if you want to see it, let me know in the comments. Otherwise, huge thank you to everyone who watched this video. Huge thank you to all of our patrons. Have a great one. And as always, GG's.